Welcome, everyone. I'm Dennis Kalnan, the president of ASNC, and on behalf of the American Society of Nuclear Cardiology, it's my pleasure to welcome all of you from around the world, Barry's friends and family, to join us for this very special tribute. This is not something that ASNC ordinarily does when one of our founding fathers and luminaries passes away. But Barry was not an ordinary man. He was extraordinary, and he lived an extraordinary life. And you're going to be hearing more about that this evening. Barry was an innovator, a scientist, a founding father for our society and for our field of nuclear cardiology, a mentor to many, a teacher, a caring, compassionate physician, a poet and an artist, a father and a grandfather, a man of very strong faith, and a friend to many, many people, many of whom are here tonight. So with that, again, I welcome all of you, especially Barry's family, who's able to join us tonight, and so that you can hear from all of us what Barry means to all of us. So next slide, please, Dawn. I also have an announcement to make tonight for the first time publicly. ASNC has decided to name the annual Young Investigator Award, the Barry Zaret Young Investigator Award. This will be an enduring annual honor to Barry, recognizing the importance that he played with our young scientists and to our society and to our field. So this will be a lasting tribute, which is certainly very, very well deserved. With that announcement, I'm now going to turn things over to Dr. Jeff Leppo, who is going to moderate this evening's session. And again, welcome to all of you.
Well, thank you, Dennis, for getting us started. I would like at this point to ask Rabbi Richard Eisenberg to do an invocation to get us properly started on this tribute. Rabbi Eisenberg.
Thank you, Jeff. And thanks to the American Society of Nuclear Cardiology for allowing me to participate in this important tribute. You know, for those of you on this Zoom session who are physicians, I'd like to just say that I knew a part of Barry that may have been a little less familiar to you, or to many of you, and that is the religious side of Barry. I believe that the spiritual side of Barry encompassed everything that we all know about: the physician, the artist, the poet. But the religious part is something that I just want to focus on for a moment. The first time I met Barry was in 1994. Barry was on the search committee of the synagogue where I served in Woodbridge, Connecticut, B'nai Jacob. And then Barry was chairman of the ritual committee for 2 years. And ritual is important, I think, to highlight here because Barry was extremely involved and extremely devoted to the rituals of our faith. He embraced the beauty and the mystery of Jewish ritual in so many facets. Barry, of course, as we all know, was a man not only of reason and science, but a man of faith and religiosity. And he saw no contradiction between those realms. Barry was a faith healer, not in the pejorative or Elmer Gantry or snake oil salesman sense, but he was a faith healer as a man who brought faith and piety and devotion into every act of healing as a physician. I referred, when I spoke at the funeral, to the fact that in the book of Exodus, God is referred to as a healer. Ki ani Adonai Rofecha is the Hebrew, for I, the Lord, am your healer. Later on in the book of Numbers, Moses is a healer who heals his sister Miriam of leprosy by pleading with God, El na refa na la, please, O Lord, heal her. So Barry saw himself as the channel, as the vehicle of healing, of God's spirit of healing. And Barry was God's instrument. Science and medicine in service of the power of divine beneficence. Knowledge, invention, discovery, and practice, all wrapped up into Barry Zaret as a reflection of God's wisdom and a reflection of his role, of Barry's role as a physician to do God's healing work in this world. And put together with that, his extraordinary bedside manner and powers as a comforter, you have all of the qualities and characteristics of a most excellent physician and healer. And so therefore, I want to conclude these remarks by way of saying and wishing and praying, may Barry's example inspire all of us in whatever we do, in whatever work we do to help, support, and heal others. And may Barry's devotion to the health and well-being of his patients be a beacon lighting the way for us all, his colleagues, his successors, his mentees, and his friends and family. And finally, may Barry's memory be an enduring source of comfort, love, blessing, and healing to us all. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Eisenberg. Just to give you some sense of where we're going with this, we have a number of invited speakers, and then we'll be turning the program over to people who raise their hands, although it will be digital in this case, which is at the bottom of your screen for reactions. But at this point, I have taking, I think, some of what the rabbi has just talked about. I wanted to introduce the aspects of Barry that I got to know so well over 30 years of working with him. And as we've just heard, at his core, Dr. Zaret was a spiritual and religious person, and he's here in Israel holding a Torah dedicated to the memory of his first wife, Myrna Zaret. For those of you who don't recognize this picture, this is this is in Cannes at the gala dinner for ICNIC 2. And for those of you who have not heard Barry sing in the style of Louis Armstrong, to Saints Go Marching In and watch him on a conga line, you've missed another part of this amazing person. He clearly enjoyed editing, but he could actually sit down and read endlessly to his grandchildren. The other center of his life is obviously his spouse, Renee Drell. And here you can actually see Rabbi Eisenberg behind them as they came off the huppah at the B'nai Jacob synagogue. But I think this picture on the lower right is really Barry in his true element, sitting at the head of a Seder with his all of his sons, his spouse, his daughter-in-laws, and grandchildren. But on top of all of that, if that wasn't enough for you, you still have a person who could write incredible poetry. And wish you all have a chance to look at barryzaret.com, which lists all of his writing, and there's a fourth book coming out. And all of his poetry actually has his own art pictures on it. And this is Zaret, it's a regular street in Italy. And the only thing that's really missing, which I got to really appreciate from Barry's art, is there's no laundry line in this picture, which he'll always seem to enjoy. But we'll move forward through our invited speakers, which include Dr. William Strauss, Dr. Jagat Narula, Dr. Pierluigi Pieri, Dr. Rob Beamlands, and Dr. Jennifer Mears. And they will be starting at this point. And at the end of that, as I said, we'll have an opportunity to have comments from the other, any spontaneous thoughts or comments that you'd like to make. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. H. William Strauss to start off our invited program.
Thank you, Jeff. Hi, I'm Bill Strauss. I met Barry about 50 years ago when we were working together as medical residents at NYU. And by chance, we both planned to follow our general medical training with fellowships at Johns Hopkins, Barry in cardiology and me in nuclear medicine. Our training programs required us to participate in research, and we decided to study whether radionuclide imaging could be used to measure left ventricular function. We spent evenings in the lab, and many, many evenings, and very late, developing equilibrium-gated blood pool imaging. We had to work out how to position the patient to optimize visualization of the left ventricle and to find the intervals to record data at end systole and end diastole. We worked with an engineer to build the gating apparatus, and we spent hours reviewing publications on contrast ventriculography and analyzed countless patient ventriculograms in the archives at Johns Hopkins. In 1971, we published 2 manuscripts, one in the American Journal of Cardiology describing the radionuclide technique to calculate left ventricular ejection fraction, and the second publication in the New England Journal validating radionuclide imaging to measure global and regional left ventricular function. Barry was the first author of the NEJ article. Coincidentally, Barry and I had very planned deferments to fulfill our active duty military obligations. By chance, we were both assigned to the David Grant Hospital at Travis Air Force Base. While on active duty and fulfilling all the clinical responsibilities, we continued our research studies in a new direction to detect changes in regional myocardial perfusion from rest to stress in patients with coronary artery disease. Barry stressed the patients, I injected the tracer and recorded the scans. These studies led to publications in Circulation, the New England Journal, and Radiology describing the sensitivity and specificity of myocardial perfusion imaging. As we were doing our research late into the evening, we would often discuss non-research topics. One of Barry's favorites was doors, their color, their size, and texture, and guessing what was separated by the door. Barry opened many doors in his remarkable career as an author, an editor, an investigator, a clinician, and a leader. The world is much richer for his contributions. Jagat, I guess you are our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Dr. Strauss. I am Jagat Narula, and I call myself a blue-eyed pupil of Dr. Zaret. I never worked at Yale, and obviously not with the master, but I've admired him, I've idolized him, I've revered him. He was my mentor from a distance. I have shared this story earlier also from the great Indian epic, the Mahabharata, wherein Eklavya is introduced as a young prince of a small tribe. Desirous of learning advanced skills of archery, he sought the tutelage of Guru Drona, the legendary weapons master and a royal instructor. Drona did not accept Eklavya due to logistic restrictions. Undeterred, Eklavya fashioned a clay statue of Drona and worshipped the statue and began an intense program of self-study. One morning, Eklavya was practicing when he heard a dog bark. Not to lose his attention, he angrily fired 7 arrows in the rapid succession to fill the dog's mouth without injuring the dog. It happened to be Drona's hunter dog. Guru was awestruck and remained proud of his long-distance pupil and his exceptional prowess. I had known Dr. Zaret only through Dr. Strauss. I was Dr. Strauss's fellow at Mass Journal for almost 9 years before I really found Dr. Zaret. And it was during one of our trips, a scientific conference back in South India, that I accompanied Dr. Zaret, and Dr. Diwakar Jain, who happens to be on the call today, was also with us. And that is for the first time when I started to realize what Dr. Zaret was, his humanistic qualities, his love, his affection, his friendship, the camaraderie, the grace, gentility. And that was the time when Dr. Zaret had started to look at the dots that the women were bearing on their head, on their forehead. And that's why I put it on the top of Barry here. We started calling him Barry G, and G is the sign of respect, quite like San in Japanese. So he was Barry G to me. He used to call me Jagat Ji, Diwakar Ji, Jeff Ji, Bill Ji, and so many others. And we had changed the way we addressed each other. This is the painting from the South India, which he had done immediately after returning back from India and gave to me as in the left panel. And then some other places where we accompanied him and got the paintings from him, as you can see on the right, which still in my office, they are right here in front of me on the wall. We all admired him, and Jeffrey just told us about all his father, husband, grandfather, a marathoner, a painter, a poet. But when we were started to be invited at the wintergreen meetings of nuclear cardiology, which actually was the brainchild of Dr. Zaret and Dr. Beller, and Dr. Beller is also on the call here, that we were very fortunate. We were lucky that we were brought in as the youngsters to the meetings there, where we were able to hobnob with all these legends of nuclear cardiology. And one of the things which we as the youngsters really admired was one of his pictures, as you can see here, that matches with somebody, and we admired him all the time. So scientific part, as Dr. Strauss just mentioned, and I don't need to go over them. That's why we call them as the co-fathers of nuclear cardiology, giving us stress myocardial perfusion imaging, giving us gated blood pool scintigraphy, first pass ventricular function, diastolic dysfunction, the mental stress, the doxorubicin cardiotoxicity. Whatever we do in nuclear cardiology is a gift from two of them. He was a trailblazer, and as we have always said, that editors are those which really fashion the field. They are not the ones who compile things. They do not only classify things and put them together for the audience. They are the one which changed the field. And the trailblazer like Barry Zaret, who started in 1994 as the founding editor-in-chief of the Journal of Nuclear Cardiology, when he started with his first editorial to be challenged and to face the challenge. And then coming to the end of his first term, where he said about the call to molecular arms and wanted to infuse molecular imaging more and more, which is when I started to really get even closer to him than what I was. And he really mentored me from distance on day-to-day basis. So 1999 was his call to arms. And in 2003, when he was laying his arms down as the editor-in-chief, he had written about a call to molecular arms answered. He had achieved everything. Now, this is one of the second of the third visit of mine to Dr. Zaret's department. When he was stepping down as the chief of cardiology, he had done 42 years in medicine, and very, very emotional poem that he had written, and he read it on that occasion. I've cared for patients in the same clinic for more than 3 decades. Some have been with me almost as long. I still pain when they fail and feel the rush of interns' joy when they recover. If ever the feeling cease, I'll nestle my stethoscope in the desk's lower drawer and begin reading books that have waited a lifetime. I was very fortunate that this year in March, I was invited by Dr. Eric Velasquez, the current chief of cardiology at Yale, for the annual Professor Barry Zaret honorary lectureship and visiting professorship. This was the first edition of it, and I just wish that there'll be many, many, many of those more for the people who he has touched their lives, and also the other people who have even not met him but will be inspired by his contributions. And as Dr. Lepo just said, that in memoriam is coming out in the Journal of American College of Cardiology, which rarely does that. And it will be publishing in the next issue. And I would like to say Barry G was unique, unprecedented, unparalleled, a Renaissance man. Barrys are born rare. His legacy would continue forever. Barry G, my gratitude, my respects. Thank you.
My next, Jeff.
Yes, you are, sir.
Oh, I was muted and I was calling Dr. Gigi Pieri. I'm sorry.
Yes. Good afternoon, dear colleague and friends. My name is Gigi Pieri. I'm talking from Cesena, Italy. I thank the American Society of Nuclear Cardiology and Jeffrey Lepp in particular for inviting me to give my contribution to the celebration of the memory of our common colleague and friend, Barry Zaret. The first memory that comes to my mind related to Barry is during his first trip to Italy. We were together in Siena in the beautiful Piazza del Campo. And while we were talking, I saw Barry lying on his back on the stone of the square. And after a while, he told me, Gigi, I'm feeling the vibration of the history and of the Renaissance time. These memories synthesizes the passion he put in all aspects of his life, in my opinion. From that time, we became good friends, and a deep friendship started that lasted for more than 30 years. This friendship enriched my life. We made last time 1 week before his death, and we were talking about painting, his painting, etc., and he was very happy because he just came from Virginia, where he went to visit the last granddaughter, newborn. Barry Zaret was a great scientist and teacher. Listening to his lectures, we could feel how inspired he was in indicating the direction of the future of nuclear cardiology. And in particular, we have enjoyed this vision during the quadrennial meeting, international meeting held in Cesena, Italy, from 1992 to 2008. In all these meetings, Barry was co-director together with William Strauss, Jeffrey Leppo, Jagat Narula, and myself. Despite being a great scientist and teacher, he impersonated a Renaissance man. He was a good painter. In this slide, you can see two paintings I have in my office. On the left side, there is a view of the Amalfi Coast of Positano in Italy, and in the right side, there is a view of the countryside around Siena during one of our post-Congress tour meetings. He was passionate for art, especially for Piero della Francesca. He loved this painter. This is a famous painter of the 15th century from Tuscany. And we did it together twice, like a spiritual pilgrimage, to see all the masterpieces of Piero della Francesca distributed in Tuscany, Marche, Umbria. He was a poet. 2 books of poems had been already published, and the 3rd book was going to be finalized. It was proximate to be published. A special memory goes to a unique scientific and humanistic meeting that he designed and in which he put his vision of a Renaissance man. This meeting was held in Monteriggioni in Tuscany on July 1999, and the title was Renaissance Perspective in Nuclear Cardiology. For this meeting, he made this painting that is shown in this left side, and this painting was used to make the brochure of the meeting. You can see Florence with the Arno River and the Ponte Vecchio. The particularity of this meeting that combined science and humanity. Excuse me. The particularity of, can you hear me? The particularity of this meeting was to combine science and humanity. 25 international speakers were invited, and in this fully immersion experience. Each morning was dedicated to the discussion of science and how to expand the nuclear cardiology on a molecular basis. Each afternoon was dedicated to visit special and inspiring places for art and humanity, like abbeys, listening to monks' chorus, and visiting museums. And during the evening, there was a special part of this meeting. 6 of the 25 invited speakers gave humanistic lectures, and Barry gave a talk dedicated to a painter entitled The Fantasy Drawings of Chaim Gross. Other participants gave unforgettable lectures on different humanistic subjects. For example, Jeffrey Leppo gave a wonderful lecture on Niccolò Machiavelli and others. Science, clinical practice, and humanity enrich each other. This was probably the legacy of this extraordinary man that we had the privilege to befriend and colleagues. And finally, I like to remember Barry as it appears in this picture taken during the meeting in Tuscany in the field of the sunflower together with some good friends. Thanks again, MASNC and Jeffrey Leppo, for asking me to give my personal tribute to this extraordinary man and friend. And now, I turn off the camera.
Good evening. I want to thank Jeff for inviting me to this tribute to Barry. I've been asked to speak on his international impact. We've just heard from Dr. Pieri and all the amazing things that already have been highlighted through his collaborations, through ethnic meetings and so on. But so I wanted to speak to that about his international impact. I didn't myself know Barry well, but I do recall the beginning of the journal and his enthusiasm and encouragement to me personally and those I was working with to publish in the journal, which we did. But his energy and enthusiasm really helped us to drive the field forward. I also recall fondly visiting Yale, and actually he went out of his way. He was actually retired at the time, but he went out of his way to meet with me and share his wisdom and humor, which I greatly appreciated. What I would like to do is I've reached out to other members of ASNC who are in the international community, and they've provided me with several quotes, and I'd like to read those and share those with you now. So first from Subha Akarvi, that Barry was an outstanding and kind-hearted person. From Dr. Chauhan in India, I express my condolences on the sad demise of Barry Zaret, renowned physician who contributed immensely to the development of nuclear cardiology. His contribution will always be remembered by one and all. May his soul rest in peace. My heart goes out to his family members and near ones. May Almighty grant strength to his bereaved family for this personal loss. From Marcus Schweiger, I always admired Barry's very structured approach to life. He was an excellent academic physician, an artist, sportsman, and a very likable intellectual. He was an important motor advancing our field. We will miss him deeply. From Dr. Ruddy, my colleague, I remember Barry Zaret from his visits to Mass General when I was a research fellow there with Bill Strauss in 1983 to 86. We'd review stress planar thallium perfusion scans at rounds, and Barry would always emphasize the patient aspect and how the scan could alter patient care. He had tremendous vision and optimism for the potential of stress perfusion imaging to improve management of patients with suspected or known CAD. At the end of rounds, we were all engaged and inspired by his thoughts and imagination, and he was so right. From Professor Abdelati, Professor Zaret is a dear friend and mentor to the Egyptian nuclear cardiologists, Adel Alam, Alia Abdel Fattah, and me since 1993. He visited Egypt 9 times and wrote an editor's page in ASNC in the 90s about nuclear cardiology on the Nile and how it is on the stream. As you know, he was not only a cornerstone in the field, but also he was an artist. He gave me one of his paintings when he was in Cardio Alex in Alexandria. He's an unforgettable, kind man and will always be in our hearts and minds. And Professor Abdelati shared this image of the painting that was given to them at the Alexandria meeting. I got a phone call last evening, and Dr. Adel Alam shared with me the impact that Barry has had on nuclear cardiology in Egypt and the Middle East, which is now very well established, and anyone who has been there will recognize the high quality of imaging there that's enabling the best clinical practices and decision-making for patients. And what Adel highlighted for me was that, in fact, he had trained there, as others did, and they brought back this knowledge to Egypt and basically established nuclear cardiology, all thanks to Barry Zaret. Basically, he was one of the co-fathers or founding fathers of nuclear cardiology that is now a worldwide diagnostic tool to help our patients. And as Adele said, Barry was the greatest. As well, Dr. Romeo Farina highlighted that at their national meeting in Spain, that Barry was honored with a moment of silence for his significant contribution to the field of nuclear cardiology. And finally, I want to highlight from Eduardo Paxeo, who wrote in the newsletter a memoriam to Dr. Zaret, which is a morte pode silenciar homen, mas neo o seu legado, which means death can silence a man, but not his legacy. And I'll just share with you, if I can. One second. You can bear with me. I seem to have lost the screen share.
You want me to pull up the PDF, Dr. Beanland?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to show you right here.
So this is the PDF, and I just thought it really highlighted Barry's contribution. It's a beautiful piece that they've also translated in English, bringing back many fond memories. Other colleagues, you see Bill Strauss there, some of the early planar imaging, Franz Walker's, and the great picture of Yale, and this fantastic picture of the team back in 95, 96, with lots of familiar faces, and Barry, of course, in the middle, and then in later years with his painting and artistry, which we have all come to love and appreciate. So just to highlight, what I'd like to say is that Barry was certainly respected as a clinician and a scientist, and he was loved as a human being. He has made more than a difference in the world, and I do want to express my gratitude to both Barry and his family for sharing his life with us. Thank you.
Good evening, colleagues and friends. Oops. Okay.
Thank you for calling. Enter your user ID and
Michelle,
I'm looking for it. I'm looking for it, Dr. Barris.
okay, got it. Okay. Ooh.
Hold on. Hold on. There we go.
Okay. Good evening, colleagues and friends, and thank you to Dr. Lepo and to the MASNC family for inviting me to share a few reflections on the great Dr. Barry Zaret. I'm Jennifer Merez, and I had the honor and privilege of meeting Dr. Zaret, the luminary Dr. Zaret, almost 29 years ago at the first ICNIC conference in Cannes in 1993. I was a fellow in nuclear cardiology, working with Drs. Rosansky and Drs. Gordon Dupuy, and had my first abstract and poster to be presented at ICNIC in Cannes, and started sort of shaking in my shoes when the luminary Dr. Zaret came by to my poster with Drs. Hendel and Drs. Walkers, and Dr. Zaret began to question me on what my poster was all about. And we were actually looking at how to use nuclear cardiology in patients after they had gotten lytic therapy to look at the extent of jeopardized myocardium. After shaking for a short while, Dr. Zaret encouraged me to turn my abstract into a publication and published in the Journal of Nuclear Cardiology. and then encouraged me to get involved with the American Society of Nuclear Cardiology. So I credit Dr. Zaret for my long history and my long experience and career experience with the American Society of Nuclear Cardiology. We fast forward to many ICNICs later, 1995, meeting Dr. Jeff Leppo, again with Dr. Zaret and Dr. Watkins and Hendel, and becoming really intrigued with the American Society of Nuclear Cardiology. And then I definitely got involved. I always look forward to seeing Dr. Zaret at ICNIC and at ASNC conferences, and treasured our conversations. And he sort of mentored me from afar. ICNIC and ASNC were at times when we connect, and he would check in as to what was going on career-wise. And we will talk about nuclear cardiology. He would encourage me to get involved with research. And then we always talk about food, art, and wine. So he was a mentor from afar, a sponsor, life advisor, guiding light for me and the entire ASNC family. On a personal note, he offered sage advice during my time on the ASNC Executive Council, encouraged me to become an ASNC president, and really was an advisor for me during my presidency year in 2009. He added inspiration, guidance, great value to my world and that of my husband, Haskell. Dr. Zaret met us in 1993. He met Haskell, and we connected again in ICNIC in 1995. And when he learned that Haskell's family were the Jews of Shanghai, and that Haskell grew up in Borough Park, they developed a special camaraderie to talk about the history of the Jews from Shanghai. And that was a special bond between Haskell, my husband, and Dr. Barry Zaret. Additionally, when Haskell decided, and my husband, if you know him, was a radiologist for 20 years, decided he was not fulfilled with radiology, initially wanted to become a rabbi, but Dr. Zaret sort of encouraged him that maybe psychiatry was a sort of good use of all of his years of studying Talmud. And so my husband, Haskell Fleischacker, today is in his 10th year, went back and trained, and is now a psychiatrist guided on the advice of simple words by Dr. Barry Zaret. So I would say his amazing legacy will live on. He will be remembered as a true mensch, an inspirational leader who positively changed the world of cardiology and touched myriad lives. I would end with a quote by Ralph Emerson that says, "The purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well." And I think this definitely embodies the life of the late, great Dr. Barry Zaret. He touched many lives, inspired and innovated and transformed the art of medicine, and we're all better because of him. Thank you. I will turn it back over to Dr. Jeff Leppo.
Well, thank you. At this point, there is an opportunity for people to raise their digital hand, and the scripted part of the program is, I can say now, is officially ended. And I'd like to, at this point, ask Ron Schwartz to make a comment, if you will. I can see your hand is up.
Thank you, Jeff. And thanks for the hours of psychotherapy since Barry's passing to help us adjust to his loss. Barry was my mentor, my friend. He changed my life. He created opportunities for me to see a path in academic cardiology that I had not previously envisioned for myself, as he did for so many people. We connected very early in the interview process about a common interest in biochemistry and myocardial metabolism. And I came to Yale with the understanding we'd be working in this area, and indeed we did. We did NIH-funded work together in conscious dogs to look at the insulin regulation of myocardial glucose metabolism. And it was a very productive interchange. And I will always remember, as will my wife, my very first presentation to Dr. George Beller at a national meeting with Barry rooting me on as I presented my first myocardial metabolism paper. So it's etched in my memory. One of my more humorous recollections of Barry, when I came to the University of Rochester, Dick Meltzer and I created a series of international cardiology meetings in the Middle East, mainly in Israel. And we invited Barry, and we had a wonderful time and having intense debates with Harvey Feigenbaum about stress echo versus stress nuclear. It was always enjoyable to watch Barry's rational discourse when debating in that format. I'm sure Jeff will remember it. Barry had a great heart. He was a mensch. Beyond a great mentor, he was a friend and really provided great advice. We had him out to Rochester. He considered a position in medicine here at one point, which we were hoping we'd get. That didn't work out, but we had a lot of opportunity over the years to reconnect. And his vision and his thoughtfulness, his kindness, his spiritual focus, and his focus on all the aspects of truth were really quite inspirational. He was a real father figure for many of us, certainly for me. I want to extend my condolences to the family. I was privileged to know Myrna and meet Renee, and I was at Adam's bar mitzvah, and Elliot and Owen. Good to connect with you all. I want you to know that we share your loss, and we all reflect in the greatness of this wonderful, wonderful man who has created the universe of nuclear cardiology and created a scientific discipline into an international family. Jeffrey, I turn it back to you. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. And I'd like to ask one of our, another Yalie who actually got to be a president of MASNC to make some comments, Dr. Ridgey.
Thank you, and I'm honored to be allowed to make a few comments. The perspective that I want to bring is my perspective when I was a junior faculty person at Yale. Barry, we talked earlier about Barry opening doors, and he didn't open doors for himself. He opened doors for others, and I think that's what he did for me. In a series of firsts in my career. I mean, he gave me, with his associate and friend Bob Sufer at the time, my first job on faculty, and that provided, obviously, to get a position at Yale and junior faculty was a big deal. A career impact was immense, but more importantly, Barry I had many mentors at Yale, right? And I was fortunate in that regard. Barry was the Uber mentor. Barry was the big picture mentor. He had a real knack for looking at the big picture. And as a junior faculty member, the impact of that, it can't be understated. I think those of us now that have been around for a while in medical education realize that. And I think of three words: wisdom, passion, and respect. He was so wise, as his wisdom was unparalleled, and has been discussed here. And what he did for me at the time was really focus me on thinking about the future, not just the present. Passion. He had a passion for developing young faculty that was palpable. And again, the impact of that when you're just starting is reassuring, right? It really is necessary for success. He recognized the passion in others as well. So he recognized that I had something in me about medical education and gave me opportunity, including not just on faculty, but led to me eventually being program director at Yale for the fellowship. And that little thing at the time had set my career in a trajectory to this day, it was one of those lifetime forks in the road that had immense impact. And I credit Barry for pointing me or guiding me in that direction at the time. And finally, respect. I think, despite the power differential when you're a junior faculty member and there's a chief of cardiology, he respected, once he gave you a job to do, a position of authority, he respected my opinions and never, wavered from that trust and respect of them. I remember once, and I had a little bit of a rebellious streak at the time. I remember once I wrote an editorial about the potential negative impact of the CBNC formation, believe it or not. I remember getting called into his office and he said, Jimbo, he said, I don't know whether I would have done that, but that was it. Just gentle guidance and respect and trust. And that role modeling has carried with me for the rest of my career. And for that, I'm grateful.
Dr. Leppo, you're on mute.
Thank you. We have yet another Yaley who's also moved up to be president of ASNC. Actually, Barry not only is a great leader, but actually has 3 Yale fellows who actually moved up to be ASNC presidents, which took a long time for anyone to catch up to that. But I'd like to ask Dr. Russell to make some comments at this point.
Jeff, thank you so much. I think many of us are still just dumbstruck by the loss of Barry, and we'll all have special memories of him. And I think one thing that I will always remember of him is his devotion of family. And that family was not just his biologic family. It was a family of students, of colleagues, of people around the world. And that was very important to me and my wife, who is also a cardiology fellow and faculty member at Yale. And as a matter of fact, we were both in that photo that Rob Beanland showed from that tribute to Barry. And my time with Barry was very important in my development. And it showed me that you can really be a great champion for your family. And that's, once again, not only your family outside of medicine. I remember once my wife and I said, we can't make it to the faculty meeting. We couldn't get a babysitter. And the first words out of his mouth were, that is what takes precedence. You be home with your daughter. But also taking care of your family inside of medicine. And so that's something that I took to heart. And as a program director for the cardiology fellowship, was very important to me, and continues to this day. So definitely a part of Barry will live in all of us. I actually have a very special remembrance of him. About 3 years before I left Yale, they moved the nuclear cardiology reading room to a different part of the hospital. And so there was a sign where the old reading room used to be. And when I left Yale, I removed this sign from that. Let's see, hopefully you can see that. It's now been 7.5 years since I left there, so fortunately the statute of limitations has run out. But it is just a reminder of the amazing people that I worked with at Yale, and there are many more that were there that I had the privilege of working with. But they were all there because of Barry. And so this is a touchstone for me to remember that. And once again, I think we're all grateful and much the better for having had Barry around. Thanks, Jeff.
Yes, thank you. I now like to introduce Dr. Nagara Tamaki, who I can't even imagine what time it is there, but I appreciate that you're on this call.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. Good morning, everybody, friends and colleagues. I would like to share just a very short comment and appreciation to Barry Zaret from Japan. I was a research fellow in 1985 at Mass General Hospital in Boston, a long time ago. At that time, Barry came to Mass General as a sabbatical. Then we can get together, we learned a lot of things. Particularly, he gave us high quality science, and we learned excellent research. For example, I just want one example. We have had a very nice and unique clinical research using ventricular function monitor, we call BEST, ambulatory ventricular function monitor, under gated Doppler scan. So we can monitor beat by beat ventricular function in daily activities. And we learn a lot of many things. At that time, my mentor, Bill Starr, was so excited, about 5 times more enthusiastic than me. And he gave me about 5 proposals. Then I just have a chance to talk to Barry Zaret. He'd be about 10 times excited about this project. And he gave me more than 10 research projects, how to do and monitor ventricular function in patients with unstable angina or some kind of a ventricular function and Barber disease and et cetera, et cetera. So we had so many things to learn from him and our colleagues. And finally, I would like to thank Barry for great contribution in our scientific field of view, particularly in the field of cardiology, nuclear cardiology. And I would like to thank for everybody as well. And thank you so much, Barry. And I will return to Jeff.
Thank you, Nagara. I saw some hands before from, yes, from Dr. Beller.
Thank you, Jeff. I was able to and had the privilege of expressing my thoughts and memories of Barry together with Dr. Wackers, Dr. Leppo, and Amy Iskandrian in the obituary, which has just been put online for the JNC. But I just want to emphasize 2 areas. One is that Barry was not just satisfied in developing his own research program in nuclear cardiology. He was a passionate advocate for advancing the field into new areas. We've already heard about his advocacy for encouraging research in molecular imaging. And this was manifested in so many ways: the development of MASNC itself as an institution, the idea for the wintergreen conferences. And when we planned those 3 conferences, Barry always wanted to make sure that we had speakers who could speak on basic research. We even had people not in nuclear cardiology come to speak about basic science to encourage us to move the field forward beyond our standard perfusion imaging, gated blood pool imaging. And this was also manifested in the idea for starting a journal. And what did he do in that journal? he pushed the field, advanced the field with his editorials and with the kind of articles and reviews that he sought to publish. And this was true even in my experience with Barry with the 4 editions of the book we wrote together. Barry made sure that we had chapters that looked beyond. And it was no doubt that Barry played such an important role in establishing our field as a credible contributory subspecialty of cardiology. And the other thing I would just like to say, that Barry had unbelievable capacity for friendship. He made friends all over the world. He got to know our families. He would ask me about my children. He consoled me when my wife died. And I think this is something that was amazing, that he could balance this humanistic quality, artistic quality, with his great vision for science. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, George. Other hands have gone up. Robert Davidson, could you unmute? You need to unmute. No, there you go.
Can you hear me? Okay. I know the hour is late, and I'll keep my comments short, but having known Barry for about 60 years probably puts me in the unique category of having known him the longest. We were in college, medical school, internship, and residency together. But we separated at our fellowship. I went into cardiology fellowship at Duke. We then went into the Air Force at the same time. He on the West Coast, myself on the East Coast. And we also wound up on separate coasts. I'm at Cedars. I'm a non-nuclear cardiologist. I had the pleasure of knowing Barry all those years, seeing each other and families. During that time, our families grew up together. He was with us at the gravesite when my son was tragically killed a few years ago, and something I'll always remember. As was mentioned, he was not only the smartest guy in the room, which was apparent from the time we were in college together, but a humanist, as has been described by everybody who's been on this program. But I think even as importantly, a modest person. We were together for a weekend in New York, just a week and a half before he died. We spent the weekend together. It was one of the best weekends I've had, and one that I'll always remember. Just a ordinary, kind, funny, humanistic person who made an incredible legacy in nuclear cardiology and other aspects of medicine as well. Again, just somebody I'll miss as much as family. And thank you for allowing me to have a few remarks.
Yes, well, thank you. And Brian also has his hand raised and has been very patient.
I just wanted to add some comments. Thank you, Jeff. And it's a pleasure seeing everyone, albeit virtually, for this tribute. And just want to underscore really what everyone has already touched on, but maybe just add a few other comments. We all knew Barry, as you know, at least kind of grew up with him. I can definitely say he was instrumental for me going into both cardiology and nuclear cardiology. And I'm back on.
I'm sorry, Brian. I think I unmuted you. Can you come back?
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Sure. Thank you. No, Barry was instrumental in me going into both cardiology and then subsequently nuclear cardiology. I just want to comment really on some of the like everyone mentioned, the humanistic side of him. I mean, he was just amazing when we would be reading nuclear cardiology together. I think I learned just as much about nuclear cardiology as I did about jazz music. He could give you the history of Thelonious Monk and Miles Davis and I learned all about how the light is different in Tuscany and in White Lily Pond up in the Berkshires, and how also what were the best years for Brunello. So it was really not just about nuclear cardiology and cardiology in general, but really just his love of life. It really just exuded. And when I always said, you always knew when Barry was in the room. It wasn't just because of his stature, being tall, just the presence that he had when he walked in the room. I almost felt like he was a character on a stage. When he would walk in, he would start talking. It was almost like just the command that he would have over a room was just amazing. And then I look back at the times of the one-on-one times that we had together, the mentorship and advice, and just the interest he had in professional development, and really towards me, it was so personalized. It really wasn't just, he never felt like you were just another fellow or another faculty member. It was really just the guidance that he gave was just it was amazing. And I'll just leave with one funny anecdote that some of the fellows or anyone who might have trained me remember. When you would have to give grand rounds or a Friday morning conference as a fellow, Barry would be sitting right in the front row, and usually Franz Walkers would be next to him, and there was a whole, no one else could sit in that front row. That was Barry's row. And the joke was that as you were presenting, he would put his feet up on the front row there at times, and you'd be standing there, and the joke was that if you knew that he didn't like your presentation as his feet were up, he would go like this with your head so that your head would be in the front of it, that he was kind of cutting you out. So it was a little joke that we had. But again, just spoke to how really the respect that everyone had for him, and really his legacy is going to endure. And it was really a privilege and an honor to train under him, and he will be sorely missed.
Well, thank you, Dr. Abbott. That was helpful. And I'm looking, I know Dr. Diwakar Jain was this hand raised before, but I don't see him on my screen. Is Diwakar still on?
Yes, I'm on. Do you have a minute?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm Diwakar Jain. I joined Dr. Zaret's department as a research fellow in nuclear cardiology in '89. Prior to that, I was working in Dr. Lahiri's lab in England, a very close friend of Dr. Zaret. And oh boy, what a treat it was to move to USA to Dr. Zaret's lab. I mean, it was a whole new field, as it has been remarked so many times, so many new doors of intellectual pursuit, and so many new things in life they opened up. So apart from a great academician, which everybody has talked about, but Barry Zaret was also a super philosopher. You could engage him into a very intellectual discussion about almost any aspect of life, art, science, history. It was amazing to see the depth of knowledge, understanding, and analysis of every aspect of life. And he had a zest for life. We traveled together to so many meetings all over the world, India, China, Israel. And it was amazing to see the world through the eyes of an accomplished artist. He would see beauty in practically everywhere in the world. And, it was amazing to see how much he could see. And so it is a great memories of traveling. We crisscrossed India. We went to so many different places, and he had read about them, and he knew probably more about those places than I, having grown up in India, knew about those places. So it's amazing, how he could blend academia, science, literature, art, as well as philosophy into a single stream. And he opened, so apart from nuclear cardiology, he started what became like a mature specialty, or is heading toward cardio-oncology. That was his studies, and to this date, his criteria for calling cardiotoxicity have been modified by practically every single recommendations, many times even without giving the source. And he started neuro cardiology. We did studies on mental stress, and now it's becoming increasingly recognize how, and when he started, it was like a novelty. Everybody's jaw would drop. What are you talking about? But anyway, he opened so many different areas which assumed life of their own. And it was amazing to be in the middle of all of this. So Barry Zaret, was his contribution to everything, and particularly to my development and growth, are immense. My tributes to Dr. Zaret and his family, and his legacy will last forever.
Thank you, Doctor. I don't see any more hands at this point, and I would like to ask Renee Drell, Barry's spouse, to make some comments at this point.
Thank you, Jeff. Barry and I were married on December 22nd, 2013. So thank you to the American Society for Nuclear Cardiology and to Dr. Jeff Leppo and staff members Michelle Klink and Dawn Edgerton for coordinating this overwhelming tribute, and to Drs. Strauss, Narola, Pieri, Beanlands, and Mieres. All of you have given our family a magnificent gift. Not only a recording of tonight's program, but memories of Barry and the esteem in which his colleagues hold him. Also, the recollection and images of Barry that we can never see again. So you are giving us this extraordinary gift of his legacy to his children, to his grandchildren, to those not yet born, and to those about whom we will not even know. Tonight's words and event are a treasure. With much gratitude, thank you again.
Thank you, Renee. This has been a very moving experience, and I would like to thank all of you who have shared your thoughts and all of you who have listened. I have a last little piece to throw in here, which relates to my dealing in March of 2020. My roommate from college unfortunately got COVID in the first month in New York City and died. I struggled with that, and Barry helped me write a haiku to kind of get this, kind of help me. And for those of you who know me, you would think that the haiku is about the opposite of Jeff because it's 17 syllables. But I felt I needed to do this at the end to help me get through this experience with Barry. So from my perspective, an aura of kindness beamed by his speech, pen, and brush, a balm for our souls. I thank you all for being part of this, for your kind attention and respect for the passing of a great person. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, thank you for everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you
Jeff.
so
Thanks,
much.
Jeff.
See you.
Everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yes, thanks. The only thing I wish is I didn't have to do this.
Thank you, Dr. Leppo.
There's nobody better to do it than you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeff, you noted Astrid just chimed in. Astrid was Barry's invaluable assistant for so many years.
A long time.
Right. It was that was Barry worked for Astrid. if you did.
That's funny. It was 29 years, and boy, they were wonderful years. And he was at times so unpredictable, but the best boss ever. Loved him to pieces.
Yes.
Mercurial.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
I'm going to adjourn the meeting now. Thank you all for being here. And Dr. Lepo, thank you so much for this.
A pleasure.